Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Rowe. We're looking at Intermediate Algebra Part A. This is lesson number 5, Commuting with Associates. I'm going to quickly go over the properties again, just so you can hear them from a different perspective, and then show you what they might look like. And then if you have any questions, as always, send me a teacher message or make an appointment or a help session. So here's the first property I'm going to look at is commutative properties. Now, commutative means terms switch places. This is like you're commuting to work. You're going to change from your house to your job, or your job to your house. So for addition, A plus B equals B plus A, you see the terms just switch places. For multiplication, A times B equals B times A. Again, the terms switch places. So what might this look like in a problem where you're trying to identify them? Well, there's a couple things. It could be as simple as that. X plus 7 equals 7 plus X. But then it could be disguised as something else. So it could look more like this. And you see right here, we just switched these terms. 7 plus 2x became 2x plus 7. Now this looks like it might be another property, but it's still commutative. And it could look similar for multiplication. So that's commutative properties. Remember, terms just switch places. All right, so here's the associative property. Associative property means that something is grouped and then you regroup it with something else. So you've got one set of friends and then you decide you don't like one of those friends anymore, and then you get a new set of friends. So you're grouping with a different group. So what might this look like? It could be real simple. And I'm actually copying the property. I don't know what I'm doing, Mr. Rowe. Pay attention. Show me something that looks like what I might see in the problem. All right, so you might be given this. Well, what do you have to do on this? You have to add 7 and 8. So the regrouping would be to group the 7 and the 8 together. So as simple as that. Could be as simple as this. Associative property is kind of hard to hide. So that's pretty much what you're going to see if you're trying to identify associative property. Just remember that what is inside the parentheses changes. Now the numbers won't change. It's just what is inside changes. So that's associative property. That's just regrouping. All right, distributive property. People often confuse associative and distributive. But here's the key. Distributive has to do with multiplication. So if you don't see something being multiplied, then it's not associative. Or if you don't see something being multiplied, let me say that correctly, it's not distributive. It's probably associative or commutative with something switching. So distributive has to involve multiplication. So this has to involve multiplication. So you have to multiply. So you see we got this being multiplied by both terms inside. And then it works in reverse. If the same thing is being multiplied we could pull those out of the problem and put it outside the parentheses. So what might this look like? Well, it could look like this. So that's distributor property. Or it could look like this. See, both terms are being multiplied by 7. I pulled that 7 out, and then what's left in parentheses is x plus y. So you have to see parentheses and multiplication to have distributive. Don't confuse it with associative, where you can only have one operation at a time, either multiplication or addition. Okay, the identity properties. Identity means that you're trying to get back to what you started with. So additive identity always deals with 0, adding 0, not multiplying by 0, adding 0. So that's additive identity. That's additive identity. That's multiplicative identity. That's multiplicative identity. The goal for identities is to get back to the same thing you started with. Okay, then you have this one, the multiplicative property of 0, the easiest property in the world. Anything times 0 is 0. So that's the multiplicative property of 0. That's the multiplicative property of 0 because you're multiplying by 0. Anytime you multiply by 0, you got the multiplicative property of 0. Inverses. Inverses, you're trying to cancel something out. So the only time you're going to see an inverse is if something in the problem cancels. It has to cancel by addition, so then you're adding an opposite. If it has to cancel by multiplication, then you're multiplying by a reciprocal. So if you don't see an opposite and if you don't see a reciprocal, it's not an inverse property. So 7 plus negative 7, that's an additive inverse. This is the property you're going to use to solve a lot of equations. 7 times 1/7 equals 1. That's the multiplicative inverse. So inverses, you're trying to cancel something out. For addition, you're trying to get to 0. For multiplication, you're trying to get to 1. And some other properties that you could see. Reflexive property, another easy property that just says that something on one side equals the same thing on the other side. So 10 equals 10 is reflexive. Symmetric means that if x equals 10, for example, then 10 equals x. But you got to have two statements for it to be symmetric. Transitive property, a equals b, b equals c, then a equals c. So if x equals y and y equals 10, then x also equals 10 is the transitive property. But again, you got to have three statements. And then the substitution property. Substitution is where you replace something with something else. So for example, if x equals 5, and I've got x times 2, Then I can replace x with 5. 5 times 2. And that's substitution. But it also looks like this. Let's say we had 7 plus 10 plus 15. Well, what is 7 plus 10? 7 plus 10 is 17. So I can replace 7 plus 10 with 17. That is the substitution property. So it's none of the other properties, it's substitution. If I replace something with something completely not that, it's substitution. So please review these properties before you start the lesson and kind of look at what I've done here and kind of compare it to what you got as your assignment. I've done a lot of very similar things. And again, if you still don't understand, make sure you make that appointment for a help session or send me a teacher message.